We all know interior designers love to talk about what not to do. So no carpet, no matching furniture, no frills. But here's the thing. A lot of these design no-nos have creeped their way back into the zeitgeist, and designers are using them in a really interesting way. So that's why today I want to go through 5 bad interior design trends that are actually cool again and how it is that happens. So if this is something that interests you guys, drop a comment saying part 2 below because I could not fit everything into this one video. So if enough of you ask for it, I will make a part 2. So let me know in the comments and let's get started. Hi guys, I'm Louie. I'm an architect and designer, and I have 20 years of experience in the design industry spanning multiple different fields. And here we like to talk about design that works and why it works. So if that's something that interests you, hit subscribe because on the menu today we have bad advice that turned good. So let's go. I'm just going to go ahead and start with number 1, glass blocks. I want to get the most controversial one out of the way because glass blocks, they were so cool and then they were so not. And I want to explain how it is that happened. So let's have a look at how they came to be and how they faded away. They didn't start in the 80s. Hollow glass blocks actually date back to the late 1800s. Architects were experimenting with ways to bring natural light deeper into buildings, but they needed to do this without sacrificing privacy or structural integrity. Swiss architect Gustave Falconier patented early modular glass bricks in the 1880s, and by the 1930s, modernist architects were using them to diffuse light beautifully, most famously in the Maison de Verre in Paris, so this material has real architectural credibility. However, their moment came a little later, the 80s and early 90s. Postmodern design loved bold geometry, curves, grids, gloss. Glass blocks felt futuristic, architectural, and slightly glamorous. They symbolized privacy without heaviness, light without transparency, structure without drywall, and then they became overused. So by the late 90s and early 2000s, they were associated with mall bathrooms, builder-grade remodels, heavy grout lines, and what once felt sculptural started to feel institutional. And they are now back because our priorities have changed again. The truth is right now, we want open spaces still, but we also want separation. We want lots of natural light, but we also want softness. And of course, we want architectural interest, but without the clutter or the price tag. They will diffuse light in a way regular windows can't. They also create privacy without shutting down the space, and they will add rhythm and texture without adding objects. So here's how we're seeing them today. Slim, partial room dividers and open floor plans, sculptural shower enclosures, stairwell light features, kitchen islands, and then maybe replacing upper cabinets, and even exterior garden walls that glow at night. They're being paired with warm woods, natural stone, plants, and soft lighting because the color palette is warmer than it was in the 90s, and the grout lines are tighter than they were in the 80s, so the forms are cleaner and they feel sculptural and textural. Glass blocks aren't back because we forgot the 80s, they're back because we finally learned how to use them in a way that makes sense to us today. Now let's move on to number 2, sunken living rooms. This is one of my favorite ones. I love a sunken living room. I love a conversation pit. I think it is so much fun. But let's be honest, having a hole in your living room can be a problem sometimes, but not in the 60s and 70s because then it was a massive flex. You saw it everywhere, from stylish suburban homes to pop culture. Even the Mary Tyler Moore Show made it iconic. You'd walk into the house, take a few steps down, and suddenly you were in the party. But here's what's interesting. The idea actually started earlier in the 1920s. Architect Bruce Goff, a Frank Lloyd Wright protege, experimented with a recessed living area. Then, in the 1950s, designers Eero Saarinen and Alexander Gerard formalized the idea with what was originally called the conversation pit, designed for industrialist J. Irwin Miller, who hosted high-profile gatherings. This wasn't random, it was intentional, and the goal was to create a space designed specifically for connection. By the 70s, it was peak lounge culture. Modular sectionals, shag carpeting, casual entertaining, it was groovy, baby, and open floor plans were emerging, and the sunken living room created a room within a room without adding walls. It felt modern, social, and even a tad glamorous. So why did it disappear? Well, gravity. They were tripping hazards, not exactly baby-friendly, not aging in place-friendly, and once design shifted towards more individualistic TV-centered layouts in the 80s, the communal pit started to feel dated. Plus, resale value fears didn't help. So why are they coming back after all? Because it is kind of very tied to a specific era. And the reason is, I guess, because we're kind of tired of open concepts. They are too open, they are too concept. We've had too much of them. We want spaces that have zones and a little bit of intimacy. And the idea of a sunken pit is just to create another level in your space. And that way you have a room within the room. You don't have the walls. You have a space created for connection, which is something that we are desperately craving at the moment. And like I said, we've had the open concept. Now we want to feel embraced and somewhat cocooned. So it doesn't mean small, intimate spaces, but it does mean zoning done appropriately. And the pit helps with that. And today's version, it's not shag carpet and chrome, it's clean lines, built-in seating, neutral upholstery, and strong sight lines. It's less kitsch nostalgia and more spatial psychology. We're rediscovering that people crave spaces designed for conversation, not just circulation. Okay, before we move on to the third one, I want to point something out. Our lives have become so screen-centric and we've become so digitally inclined that the idea of having a built-in space that forces you to have conversation and sit together away from screens kind of seems like a radical idea right now. So it's something old that right now feels radical and somewhat avant-garde. And I really love that about this trend. So yeah, that's one of the things I wanted to point out. And now let's move on. Now let's move on to number 3, floral wallpaper. That's it. Florals are no longer relegated to your grandmother's walls. They are back and they are having a moment. So let's have a look at how they came to be to begin with. Floral wallpaper has actually been around for centuries, but its most recent peak was the 80s and 90s. Back then, we saw tiny repetitive florals everywhere. Country kitchens, romantic traditional bedrooms, layered cottage interiors. It reflected the lifestyle of the time. Cozy, decorative, very homey. Pattern was layered on pattern, more was more. Florals felt charming, feminine, comforting, until they didn't. So why did it disappear? Minimalism happened. The late 90s and early 2000s wiped the slate clean. Beige, gray, white walls, clean lines, visual quiet. Those small, busy florals suddenly felt fussy, overstimulating, dated, and for almost 2 decades, nature was off the walls. So the reason they're coming back is actually because we are tired of the sterile minimalism that we've been living for a while. We want things that are rich. We want texture. We want coziness. Coziness is back. We want it. We've been through a lot, and right now our homes need to feel safe and they need to feel embracing and warm, and they need to reflect us in a way that maybe they haven't in the past, because that is our home. So the florals bring a bit of all of that. They will bring the hominess, they will bring the coziness, and they will even bring a lot of visual interest. So let's see how we can apply it today so that it doesn't look like when we applied it in the 80s and 90s. Now we're picking up on oversized botanical prints, dark moody backgrounds, romantic small-scale florals, and bucolic landscape murals that feel almost cinematic. It's not decoration anymore, it's all about atmosphere. Right now, the key difference is going to be restraint. You're not going to see them on your walls, curtains, and sofas like they used to do back in the day. Today, they're becoming focal moments. So you'll see it in a powder room or a foyer for drama, behind a bed as a statement wall, in dining rooms for depth, or even as full murals that wrap one whole space, and the rest of the room stays calm. Simple upholstery, natural materials, controlled color palettes. I probably say this every episode, but if everything is screaming, nothing gets heard. So that's why you're not going to go overboard with the florals. You're really going to use them as a statement, as a moment within your space, because today it's not about filling the whole space up. It really is about using them in a more intentional and focused way. Quick break, everyone. I have launched an Amazon storefront where I'm curating designer-approved pieces that I love and that align with everything I teach here. Lighting, hardware, rugs, and more. I'm still adding to it regularly, so it'll continue to grow. So if you're shopping for home upgrades, using those links is a great way to support the channel. I earn a small commission at no extra cost to you, and it helps me keep creating these videos. Now let's get back to the video. For number 4, we are visiting tile countertops. Now, I actually have kind of a soft spot for this one because I see it a lot in Brazil. Now, Brazil isn't a very rich country, right? So what you'll see in a lot of the local bars and restaurants, or on those restaurants on the side of a freeway, for example, are cheaper solutions. So they won't have money to go out and buy granite or, any kind of natural stone to do their countertops, which would be ideal because of the wear and tear and whatever. they actually use tile because it's cheaper, they can install it's easy to replace, and that way it's kind of becomes something that you see in lots of different places. So I have a soft spot for it, like I said, and I'd like to see that now it's being incorporated into more luxurious or more design spaces because it is quite an interesting aesthetic. So let's have a look at it and later we'll see how we can use it today. Tile countertops had a major run from the 1970s till the 1990s, and they were heavily influenced by Mediterranean and Spanish revival design. Think terracotta tones, earthy palettes, handcrafted details. At the time, tile was also a practical and affordable alternative to solid stone. It felt warm, rustic, old world, and in many homes it became the standard. But then came granite and later quartz. Seamless slabs became the status symbol, clean, smooth, minimal, easy to wipe down, and meanwhile, tile developed a reputation problem. Grout lines became the villain, they felt busy, hard to clean, visually chaotic, and when poorly installed, they chipped or stained. So in a world moving towards sleek perfection, tile countertops suddenly felt outdated. Tiles will bring something that marble slabs just can't, and that is a feeling of handmade. So think of Zeliga tiles, artisanal finishes, subtle variations in tone, soft tonal palettes instead of high contrasting ones will help it feel layered and collected. So I guess the main difference between how it used to be used and how it's used today is that today it's cleaner, it's more controlled. Of course, we have better techniques, better tiles, better grouts. So all of that stuff helps with durability and to make it long lasting and actually make it a functional choice other than marble or granite, because those we know are very easy maintenance, they're very clean, they're very easy to work with, and tiles can be a little bit more complicated. So today, keeping it clean and making sure that it's well installed is fundamental. So I would suggest choosing larger tiles if you're uncomfortable with grout lines and small ones if you feel like embracing the pattern. But you want to keep the color palette tight and tonal. You can pair with something simple like cleaner cabinetry and consider using it on an island, a bar area, or a butler's pantry first so that you can have that statement moment and make it feel textural and architectural. And now number 5, checkerboard floors. It's true, it's back, and Kris Jenner's old foyer is having a comeback moment, except this time we're gonna do it a lot less glossy. But honestly, before the queen of reality TV made it such a pop culture staple, checkerboard floors have actually been around for a long time and they've been considered chic for centuries. It's just a question of finding the right kind for your moment in time. So let's see how they came up and we'll have a look at how we can use them today. They've been around for centuries, and you'll find versions of them in European palaces and classical architecture, but their most iconic cultural moment in the US was in the 1950s. Black and white tile floors became synonymous with retro diners, soda fountains, and mid-century kitchens. They felt graphic, optimistic, and rebellious. Then in the 1990s, they had another revival, often larger scale, sometimes in marble foyers or dramatic entryways, but eventually they started to feel themed, too retro or costumey, and like most bold patterns, they become easy to overdo. So like many other trends on this list, as minimalism took over, they started to disappear. Floors became quiet, almost monolithic. They prioritized wide plank wood, pale oak, seamless concrete, neutral tile. The philosophy shifted to let the architecture speak softly, and checkerboards felt loud in comparison. And now that we're kind of sick of the visual sameness and the monolithic textures, we want character, we want personality, and checkerboard floors are a great way to achieve that. We just have to tweak it a bit so that it doesn't look like what came before and it's more reflective of contemporary culture, the now. Checkerboard works because it's structured, it's geometric, it's balanced, and there's just order to it. Black and white or any two-tone variation is inherently classic, but we want floors that look less like a trend and more like heritage. So today we're seeing softness and restraint. It's not always stark, glossy black and white Kris Jenner style checkerboards. Instead, we're seeing cream and taupe, warm brown and ivory, soft gray and limestone, marble with subtle veining. The contrast is gentler, but the materials are actually richer. And importantly, the floor gets to be the statement. So furniture, walls, and decor are cleaner. So the same rule applies here as we did with the florals. We don't want it everywhere. We won't want checkerboards are loud enough. So everything else has to kind of support it and let it be the protagonist of the space. Same thing with the florals. Remember, we don't want it on everything. We want it in focal moments. So think of it like a very special part of your room that you need to support and that needs to be the star. Okay, I want to take a quick second for an honorable mention, and that is frills, because we have been living in a frill-free space for so very long. It was just considered dainty and kind of like fussy and a sure way to date a space. But today, like I've been mentioning all throughout this video, since we want character, coziness, we want to feel embraced and we want personality in our spaces, and we're slowly stepping away from the stark minimalism that came before. So let's have a look at how we can frill up our space in a fun way. Softness is coming back, and we're seeing it in skirted sofas, slip-covered chairs, pleated, even slightly ruffled lampshades. It's popping up everywhere again. And the reason for this is because after years of sharp lines and ultra-minimal interiors, people are craving something warmer and more embracing. And a lot of it is being influenced by the English countryside and grand millennial aesthetic, where spaces feel layered, comfortable, and a little nostalgic. But the modern version is much more controlled. Designers are using tailored skirts rather than overly gathered ones, solid fabrics instead of busy florals, and one soft element in a room balanced with cleaner pieces. So this is important to state. When it comes to frills this time around, it's not about putting it everywhere. It's about putting it somewhere where it's going to have direct contrast with everything else. So if you have a very modern space and you put in a slightly more traditional element, all of a sudden you've got that good tension and you got that visual interest that makes the space so interesting. So at the beginning of this video, I told you guys we were going to look at bad interior design trends that are actually kind of cool and relevant again. And hopefully by now you agree with me, because I find these kind of fun. I'm excited to work with them myself. And hopefully I brought some new things to the table so that you can consider what new trends are popping up and how you can use them. But most importantly, just understanding how things come to be relevant, stop being relevant, and come back. That's why I always say, when it comes to design, when it comes to fashion, when it comes to anything visual, never say never. I even have a hard time saying that something is tacky, because so many things that I've found tacky in the past, I love now. The glass bricks, that's a great example. There was a moment in time where I would have seen that and I would have like, oh my God, that is so tacky. That is so gauche. It's just not right. And today I see it and I think it's super fun. In fact, it's popping up all over JFK Jr.'s apartment in Love Stories. So if you guys are watching that, you've probably seen them everywhere. But the idea here, what I want to really emphasize, is that with design, everything's very subjective and they change. And if something is just a mistake or considered a design mistake, it's probably because it was poorly executed. It was maybe too associated to a moment in time, and then it becomes dated. But whatever goes will come back. And I say that all the time. So that's it for me today, guys. I'm going to stop because I can go on and on about design all day long. So if you guys had a good time, if you learned something, if you had fun, just drop a like, comment, subscribe. Remember that if you want more on this topic, drop a part 2 in the comments below, because I could not fit everything into this one video and there's a lot more we could talk about. So let me know, because if enough of you say it, I will make it happen. So yeah, and for now, that is it. I will see you next week and we will talk then. Bye. If you want more help designing your home, I have 2 free resources. You can download my free 30-page home checklist. It walks you room by room through all the essentials to create a cohesive, beautifully styled home. And I also have a color palette inspiration pack, a 45-page guide with designer-curated palettes, hex codes, mood groupings, pro color tips, a beginner-friendly color wheel, and easy hacks to mix colors confidently. Both links are below, so grab them and have fun.